Hello, hello, hello. I know we are the last panel, so thank you guys for staying to the final and last. They say best for last, no? So we'll see if it's true. We're going to start off by introducing our panelists, and who better to introduce them than themselves? We'll start off with John.
Hey guys, my name is John Dennehy. I'm from New York originally. I've been living in El Salvador for 3 years. So actually, almost 3 years ago exactly, at this conference when they made the announcement about legal tender, then I bought a one-way ticket and I barely leave, right? Come to Nashville for a conference. But I'm the founder of Mi Primer Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin education nonprofit. We started in El Salvador in 2021. Since then, we've taught over 30,000 in-person students in El Salvador. We've open sourced all of our materials, so our flagship product is a 10-week Bitcoin diploma. We've open sourced that, and now that's being taught in at least 25 countries around the world. We also work with the Ministry of Education. This year, we're training 700 public school teachers to teach that Bitcoin diploma in the public school system. Next year, the idea is to have it in every school in the country. So we believe that what happens in El Salvador will echo around the world because it's the first country, and that education will be the foundation for ensuring that that's a positive example.
Rodolfo.
Bueno, my name is Rodolfo Andragnes. I'm founder of the Bitcoin Argentina NGO. Since 2013, the longest running also Bitcoin conference, which is called LABITCONF, since 2013, and the biggest one in Latin America. Also former owner of bitcoins.com, so I'm in the space even before Bitcoin started somehow. And I also will represent with some information Bitcoin for OS, which is, Bitcoin for OS, it's a group educating over 300 developers, Bitcoin developers in Latin America, yes, to start working on top of Bitcoin, and they will be granting all these developers finally with micro grants for helping other projects, open source projects in the space.
Well, nice to see you guys. I'm Borja. I've previously co-founded Lemon. Lemon is one of the largest crypto apps in Latin America with over 2.5 million users. And right now, we announced 2 days ago our new project, which is Roxom, the first Bitcoin-denominated stock, commodities, futures exchange. Let's say Wall Street for Bitcoin, with our pre-seed round led by Tim Draper, David Marcus, and others.
All right, that is our panel for today. And before we start, I want to ask you guys in the audience, by a show of hands, who here has spent sats in Latin America? All right, that's pretty good. And who here has heard or believes Latin America is at the forefront of Bitcoin adoption? All right, we're going to find out. Let's see. So, obviously, we got two Argentinians, and we got someone that lives in El Salvador. And I want to know, from your perspective, what is the actual reality of Bitcoin in your country, and how is it actually being used? Because it's one thing that we see on social media and the news coverages and the articles that are online, but you guys that live there and have seen it, how is it? Can we start with John and then?
Yeah, so El Salvador is a special case. I don't think there's another place in the world where the answer to the question would be similar to the reality in El Salvador, because it's legal tender there. So there's a strange thing in El Salvador where there are many people that use Bitcoin that don't understand it, right? Like they work at a shop that accepts Bitcoin, but they know nothing about it, right? It's just an app on their phone. So it is pretty easy to use Bitcoin in El Salvador, again, because of the legal tender law. Most people don't. Most people still use dollars, so there's 2 legal tenders there. But there's a growing number. As I said, I've lived there for 3 years. When I moved there, it was 0% of the people use Bitcoin outside of Bitcoin Beach, which was like an early adopter, but it's a It's a small village of about 2,000 people. In the capital, it was 0. Now I would say that 10 to 20% of the population uses Bitcoin there and has some understanding of Bitcoin, probably holds a little bit of Bitcoin, which seems low, right? You might think like, oh, that means 80 to 90% aren't using it, but that's from 0, right? So we went from 0 to 20% in 3 years. And people use it for all sorts of things, right? Like I use it, I go to the coffee shop, I pay for my coffee with Bitcoin, I pay for my, on the delivery app, I use Bitcoin. In restaurants, I use Bitcoin. It's basically optional at this point. If you want to use Bitcoin in El Salvador, you can. You don't have to, and many people don't. But if you want to spend Bitcoin, then there are tons of options for you to spend Bitcoin. And the percent of people who are choosing that option is always trending upward.
Well, in my case, I would do like a timeline. Yes, when I started, it was in 2011. We had hundreds and hundreds of miners, young miners, gamers doing Bitcoin there, and around 2012, 13, there was a very well-known company that then became a competitor of his, which is called, at that time, Bitpago, something like that, that we had about 600 or more hotels getting paid in Bitcoin, brought those Bitcoins back into Argentina because we had capital controls. They couldn't move dollars into Argentina, or if they did, they lost 50% of the value of the dollars. So Bitcoin was like a tool to go beyond all restrictions, capital restrictions, and this made a huge market because they needed to sell all these Bitcoins into Argentina. So I think it started actively because of the real use case. But along the time, Argentina is a very big country. We have about 25% of this country that already has some kind of access to some crypto, yes? And I would say that today, Bitcoin is mainly a store of value, not a use, not for daily use, but we have a fair amount of people storing value, in big part also thanks to what they did later, but mostly use other crypto assets on obviously dollars, but dollars not in a daily basis as they do because you have dollar as a legal tender, yes, but pesos and dollars are the use case for payments, and crypto is very, very deeply used also beyond, but most people have also some Bitcoins as a store.
Yeah, to complement what Rodo says is Argentina is, and many countries in Latin America, they are full of currency controls and restrictions. So actually, one of the things that we like to say is that one of the best use cases for crypto is down there, right? What we did in the past regarding Bitcoin adoption, I believe, for example, we had a debit card, it still exists, where we gave 2% Bitcoin cashback to our customers. We have granted over millions and millions of dollars in Bitcoin to millions of users. And to be honest, like we can say that today, at least in Argentina, there's more than 2 million people that have received Bitcoin directly only from us. And there's like 10, 15 more companies down there. Estimations say that there's 10 million people in Argentina, for example, with Bitcoin, which is 25% of the population. And if you take that into the economically active population, that's around 50%. So 1 out of 2 people or persons that make money, they either have Bitcoin or have crypto and so on. And what Rodo says is very true. Bitcoin is a great way to store value. So really, people, their deep savings, they put it into Bitcoin. And there's an amazing use case in terms of stable coins and USDC and USDT, because basically nobody wants pesos, right? Nobody wants the local currency. So everybody, when the month starts, they pay bills and credit cards and so on with their pesos. And what the leftovers, they buy stable coins. And the leftovers of the leftovers, let's say they buy Bitcoin because those are their hardcore savings, right? So I believe that the adoption is quite wide. Honestly, again, at least 40-50% of the economically active population saves Bitcoin. And that's in Argentina, it's a blessing. Like what El Salvador is trying to do, top bottom, in Argentina it just happened naturally, bottom up, and the Bitcoinization of the economy and the cryptonization of the economy just happened. So sometimes, having problems as a country can be good long term, because long term our population will have Bitcoin, whereas other countries not. So.
And one thing I've noticed is Americans and Europeans tend to dollar cost average. But in LATAM, more than 50% live day to day. How are they expected to, stack sats or integrate the use of Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, I guess we'll keep this order. So in El Salvador, there's not dollar cost averaging. It's a little bit different. I'll give an example of a restaurant where we have a meetup at. We have a monthly meetup, and they, one of the conditions is you have to accept Bitcoin. This restaurant got a lot of Bitcoin that night, right? Much more than they were expecting. And they asked their employees then, like, who wants to get paid in Bitcoin? And most of them, because they learned about it from people who went to the meetup, raised their hand, and that's how they stack sats, right? It was effectively their salary, right? So they weren't, a lot of people in El Salvador, and the numbers are only 10 or 20%, but like it's 10 or 20%, these are like active participants in the system, active users that are using it both as a medium of exchange and of store value. So a lot of people, there's ATMs all over the country, so some people might just buy it and hold on to it, but a lot of people earn it and then hold on to it then.
I don't know of people that are more Bitcoiners than Argentines. I think that Rodo can vouch for that. Argentina is like a hardcore Bitcoiner citizenship. Stacking and the concept of stacking and stacking very hard is very deeply rooted. How do they manage? Well, Argentina is also a poor country, right? The average salary is $500 a month, $600 a month. So as you can imagine, people save very little. But Argentines are happy stacking sats. They cannot stack Bitcoin, they stack sats. One Bitcoin is $60,000. Most of the Argentines will never make that amount of money in their lives. But they do buy, like the minimum purchase in most of the platforms that have been created in Argentina and amongst ours was also 100 pesos. 100 pesos is 10 cents, okay? 10 US dollar cents. So you've got a bunch of people, millions of persons that are buying 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents, $1, $5, $100. So really the stacking concept is quite hardcore, and people just love Bitcoin there.
Yes, I can say, when we're talking about poverty, yes, and actually in Argentina we have about over 50% yet, and growing, even though we are really changing things. Now we're with a new president, Milei, and things are expected to change. While the change arrives, the effort is big. And I wouldn't know really in which ways they do, but they have all the same problems that we do. They all suffer the devaluation of their currency, of their money. So even if you have a bunch or you have a few, if you had the chance to get advised about Bitcoin, which awareness is very big, I guess that any of them, poor or rich, might come to the answer that Bitcoin is a solution with whatever they can save, yes, if they do. But who doesn't save, we don't have at least circular economies working in Argentina. So there is not this situation like in El Salvador. I think I haven't seen, at least. There is a very nice place in Argentina which is called San Martín de los Andes, where we have a kind of economy that accepts Bitcoins everywhere. If you want to go to Argentina, fly down to Patagonia, to San Martin de los Andes, you will be able to play in Bitcoins anywhere. But it's just a specific use case. Though I go with what he said. I mean, it's that we are easy to understand why it makes sense. So if they have something to save, eventually they will go into Bitcoin.
Awesome. And now I want to talk about the problems in that there are in Bitcoin in Latin America. Like, what are the issues with Bitcoin adoption in LATAM? Not only in Argentina, but also, you have Chile, Peru, all these countries. What are their barriers? Because if we discuss the problems, then maybe someone that hears this, they can find a solution, to start adopting Bitcoin. Do you want to start, John?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So, education, right? There is such a strong correlation that we've seen between Salvadorians who are educated on Bitcoin and how they use it, how they interact with it, whether they save it or get rid of it. Those that are well educated use it, they save it, they have hope that it's going to make their life better. They plan things around it. Those that don't have education would prefer not to use it because they don't understand it. And a really important thing with Bitcoin adoption in Latin America and anywhere is education, and it's more than that, it's independent Bitcoin education, right? It's not education that's co-opted by some corporation. It is pure education that empowers the individual, because that is we see it firsthand, that when people are educated about Bitcoin and they're independently educated about Bitcoin, then they're empowered to take charge of their own life. So that's a core philosophy that we have, is we teach people how to think for themselves using Bitcoin as a means to that end, right? Bitcoin education as a means to that end. And there's just a strong correlation between people who are well educated on Bitcoin and how much they integrate it into their lives.
Yeah. I would say we have like 3 different things that might avoid adoption eventually. Yes. The first one is that even though we all understand that our currencies, decaying currencies, are bad, yes, for Latin Americans, the good currency is the dollar. Yes. So we need to anyway go against, we need to explain even further that the dollar is also a decaying. So in that, I think we are like all globally in the same situation. It's not that, we have a decaying currency, everyone goes to Bitcoin. No, first they need to understand. So education is the number one tool, and that's why I founded in 2013 the Argentina NGO. We do hundreds of educations in universities and schools and whatever, is that you need to understand why Bitcoin and not dollar, and for historically and decades of suffering, yes, economical crisis. In their soul, they believe that the dollar is the saving asset. Yes, the savings, no, not for saving themselves. Yes, so this is one of the big things that we need to go through to convince them. As this is not the regular currency, as in El Salvador it is the dollar, no? So they go to the dollar. The second is changing leaders' mind, that we don't need to be followers, yes, that we can be leaders, that we can do things that eventually are not the ones that other countries would like us to do, yes, like El Salvador did, yes, they became leaders, changing the rules and defining their own rules, and Bitcoin doesn't need to, in Bitcoin you don't need to follow rules, yes, you can think how you want to adopt this for your country, for your people. So I think we have a mind, usually Latin America has a mind of follower and not of leader. That's why I created also LABITCONF, with that sense of you can be leaders, you can create the very next future project or whatever. And I don't remember the third one, but I go with
I believe it's necessity. I believe that Argentina's curse is its blessing. Currency controls led to Bitcoinization of the economy. It's kind of weird what I'm going to say, but like the fastest way for broad adoption of Bitcoin is crisis. And the more crisis we get, the easier it is to understand Bitcoin and say like, I'll just go there, because it's my way to avoid all of this shitty system, So when you get a really shitty, bad economic and financial system, Argentina is an example, right? Argentine peso, Dogecoin is better, I believe, or Pepe, much better than the Argentine peso. Then Bitcoin is obvious. Like Bitcoin is scarce. Argentina's interest rate was 150%. Imagine, like 150. The central bank is paying 150% interest on fiat. And on the other hand, you have like Bitcoin where you only have 21 million. What are you going to choose, right? The one where in 1 year you need to 2.5x your monetary base to pay the interest that you promise, right? Imagine. So fastest way, like what is a problem for some countries in not only in Latin America but globally to adopt Bitcoin? The lack of problems. I believe that the world is getting into trouble, and the more trouble there is, the easier it will be to get Bitcoin. That's why we have U.S. potential presidents talking about this, because there's been a big inflation in the U.S. Like big inflation in the U.S. is like 7%, which is a mess. In Argentina, if we get 7% a month, it's glorious.
It's glorious.
But yeah, I think that the problem is that maybe we don't have enough problems yet.
Yeah. And there is one more thing that happens, which was the third one I forgot, which is scams. Yes. In Latin America, they are mainly poor people are very prompt to go into scams and to invest the money that they don't have and their cars and their families and their really, this is the situation, into scams that somehow explain later that was fake and Bitcoin is the non-situation of this scam. But that is also like a thing that it's in our, not our, but in Latin American culture. Yes, they kind of go into scams. If you are in Peru, Bolivia, lots in Argentina, they jump into every pyramid scheme that there is available, yes, because they really need to get some income beyond of their lousy, awful currency. So very prone to this. If you're scammers, please don't come down to our event. And if you don't, come to LABITCONF.
And I think that's another area where education makes a big difference, right? Education has this, it accelerates the positive, it accelerates that element of empowerment, but it's also a defense against negative forces like scams. So in both directions, education is super helpful for adoption.
And to wrap it up, I have one more question because I'm very curious about this. Why do millions of people in LATAM still use remittances instead of Bitcoin? Like, what are the barriers, in your opinion?
I'm going to be like a broken record here.
Education.
It's education. So it actually is easier, right? It's better. Many people don't know. And in addition to education, it's familiarity, right? Like people are afraid to try new things. So the first step is always the hardest. So that's, again, we're just focused. So the education that we do is to take people off of zero. And we're always working on that, and that's an example that we use. Like this is a real world application of it, and we're always trying to make it easier for people to understand, more accessible. Like today, we actually had an announcement with Fedi. So in the new Fedi app, there's now a mobile version of the Bitcoin Diploma, which is this 10-week program which takes you through financial literacy, which is the problem, right? Understanding what's wrong with the current system. And then you arrive at Bitcoin, which is the solution. And it's super accessible. People have it on their phone. Not everybody has a laptop, so it's really good for Latin America and places like that. And again, education is is the solution to so many of our problems, I think.
I think that that's not the real reason. Remittances usually work in the black market. Black market is cash, yes? And to move cash into an app and then move that to another place, it's like something that they need to understand how, and it's a peer-to-peer market eventually, unless you register on a platform, but then you do your KYC, and it's not as easy as going to places that they already know, yes, going to Western Union or whatever, and put the money there, and they take the money in the other side. So going into Bitcoin and doing these tools, either for some, unless they really understand how to do P2P, but then P2P they have to have the concern that they're not being stolen by an individual and not by a company, which I believe in the company. So I think it's like an issue because of the fact that most people that do big remittances work in black market, yes, and they work in cash. So we are used to use Bitcoin, but people that is in that situation, they need to go through education and stuff like that. But it's not only education, it's the easiness of finding someone, the easiness of trusting in someone new. It's not only education about Bitcoin. I need to trust in the counterparty and stuff like that. You know? So it's...
Yeah, my 5 cents here would be just the fact that, luckily, which is a good news, most of the companies that do remittances services and so on, not Western Union, but more the local companies and so on, most of them use crypto on the back end. Whenever you're sending money abroad, maybe the user doesn't know it, but I know most of the companies in remittances, most of the founders, and the truth is that in the back end, they are buying Bitcoin or stable coins in their country and selling it on the receiving country, and that's how they settle. So the good news is that maybe it would be ideal if the end user actually sent Bitcoin or crypto. But the good news is that most of the companies are actually using crypto on the back end. So maybe the retail customer is not educated, but definitely that tech executives are, and they are already using crypto for this.
Well, awesome. Well, I think that's a wrap. Enjoy Nashville. Thank you guys for watching and staying with us till the last panel. That was kind of dope.
Thank you.
Thank you.